an editorial defense analysis examining South Korea's military readiness and regional security.
The recent disclosure regarding the unit cost for the initial low-rate production batch of the KF-21 Boramae, estimated at approximately $83 million, has precipitated a significant reevaluation of the program within the South Korean defense discourse. While this figure places the indigenous platform in a price bracket adjacent to established fifth-generation platforms, like the F-35A Lightning II. Interpreting this valuation requires a structural analysis of acquisition mechanics, rather than a direct consumer comparison. The escalation in unit cost appears less a reflection of inherent technical inefficiency, and more a mathematical consequence of volume adjustments, and the strategic premium placed on industrial sovereignty. Understanding the viability of the KF-21 Block 1 necessitates a deep examination, and an examination of the interplay between economies of scale, life cycle sustainment models, the risks of evolutionary acquisition, and the operational requirement for independent systems integration. The primary driver of the current unit cost is a specific decision by the Defense Acquisition Program Administration to reduce the initial production batch from 40 to 20 aircraft. In defense aerospace manufacturing, the distribution of fixed costs, including tooling, production line setup, and workforce retention, across a smaller number of units invariably spikes the per-unit price. This phenomenon highlights a critical tension in the acquisition strategy, where fiscal caution regarding technical maturity ironically induces financial inefficiency. By breaking the initial mass production into smaller increments to verify the performance of the active electronically scanned array radar and air-to-air missiles, the program sacrifices the immediate benefits of economies of scale. Consequently, the $83 million figure represents a transient entry barrier rather than a stabilized long-term price point, provided that subsequent production blocks expand sufficiently to amortize the initial industrial investment. It is crucial to recognize that the F-35A benefits from a global production run exceeding 1,000 units, whereas the KF-21 is burdened by the high startup costs inherent to the very first batch of a new airframe. From an operational standpoint, the juxtaposition of the KF-21 Block 1 against the F-35A introduces a complex strategic trade-off that extends beyond the sticker price. Critics rightly point out that for a similar capital expenditure, the F-35 offers superior stealth and sensor fusion capabilities. However, this comparison overlooks the divergent roles these platforms occupy within the Republic of Korea Air Force force structure. The F-35 acts as a strategic strike asset, yet its operation is bound by strict security protocols and maintenance dependencies on the United States. The sovereign operational capability of the F-35 is constrained by the Autonomic Logistics Information System, which centralizes data processing and can limit the user's ability to independently modify mission data files. Conversely, the premium attached to the KF-21 finances the acquisition of modification rights and data sovereignty. This autonomy allows for the unrestricted integration of indigenous munitions, such as the Kaeonryung air-launched cruise missile, without requiring external foreign military sale approvals, or paying exorbitant integration fees to foreign contractors. Therefore, the high acquisition cost of the KF-21 can be interpreted as capital investment in operational independence, granting military planners the flexibility to adapt the platform to evolving regional threats without external bureaucratic friction. Furthermore, A comprehensive cost analysis must extend beyond the initial flyaway price. It must encompass the total lifecycle cost, which typically constitutes 70% of a weapon system's financial footprint over 3 decades. Fifth-generation stealth platforms utilize radar-absorbent materials and complex avionics, systems that demand specialized climate-controlled hangars and intensive maintenance hours, driving the cost per flight hour to substantial levels, often exceeding $35,000 US. In contrast, the KF-21 is designed with a focus on maintainability. Utilizing the widespread General Electric F414 engines and a structural design that prioritizes accessibility. If the KF-21 achieves its target operating cost of approximately $20,000 to $25,000 US per hour, the total cost of ownership over a 30-year service life would likely be significantly lower than that of an imported stealth fighter. This differential is critical for the Republic of Korea Air Force, which must maintain a high sortie generation rate to counter the numerical superiority of potential adversaries. A lower operating cost allows for more frequent pilot training and higher fleet availability, factors that arguably contribute more to combat readiness than the marginal technical superiority of the airframe itself. The industrial implications of the Block 1 pricing also reflect the cost of nurturing a domestic supply chain. A significant portion of the program budget flows into South Korean entities, such as Hanwha Systems for radar technology, and Lignex 1 for electronic warfare suites, unlike off-the-shelf imports where capital exits the national economy. The high unit cost of the KF-21 effectively functions as an internal transfer, a transfer that reinforces the domestic defense industrial base. This capability retention is critical for the Republic of Korea to transition from a net importer to a global exporter of advanced aerospace systems. The high unit price is, in essence, a subsidy for the learning curve of domestic engineers. However, this industrial ambition relies heavily on the eventual success of the export market, with the reduction of the Indonesian financial contribution and the uncertainty surrounding their payment schedule. The burden of funding the development has shifted more acutely onto domestic stakeholders. This increases the urgency to secure alternative export partners, perhaps in regions like the Middle East or Eastern Europe, to expand the production run beyond the domestic requirement of 120 units and dilute the unit cost. Without external buyers, the domestic budget will be forced to absorb the full weight of the development costs, potentially crowding out other essential defense projects. Nevertheless, the operational limitations of the Block 1 configuration present a genuine tactical constraint that cannot be ignored. Being delivered primarily as an air superiority platform with limited air-to-ground capabilities creates a temporary capability gap until the Block 2 upgrades are implemented, for a price point exceeding $80 million US. The lack of immediate multi-role capability implies that the initial batch will serve more as a transitional asset for pilot conversion and doctrine development rather than a fully matured combat multiplier. This necessitates a force-generation strategy where the KF-21 operates in conjunction with legacy F-15K and F-35A fleets to cover its strike deficiencies. It indicates that the value of Block 1 lies not in its standalone combat power, but in its role as a foundational architecture, upon which future capabilities, such as manned-unmanned teaming and internal weapon bays, will be built. The risk inherent in this evolutionary acquisition strategy is the potential for delays in the Block 2 development if the integration of air-to-ground capabilities faces technical hurdles. The Air Force would be left with an expensive fleet of interceptors, with limited utility in a complex multi-domain conflict. Additionally, the geopolitical dimension of the KF-21 program suggests a hedging strategy against potential shifts in alliance dynamics. While the US-ROK alliance remains the cornerstone of national defense, the shifting priorities of American foreign policy necessitate a degree of self-reliance. A fully indigenous fighter program provides South Korea with a strategic insurance policy, ensuring that the Air Force can sustain operations even in scenarios where supply chains from allies might be disrupted or politically constrained. The KF-21 utilizes open architecture avionics, which allows for the rapid integration of third-party systems or locally developed countermeasures, a level of adaptability that is often restricted in exported U.S. platforms due to technology protection regulations. This sovereignty premium embedded in the $83 million cost is intangible in peacetime, but becomes a decisive factor in crisis management. Ultimately, the controversy surrounding the price of the KF-21 Block 1 illuminates the inherent friction between the desire for advanced independent defense capabilities and the economic realities of limited production runs. The decision to proceed with a high unit cost reveals a policy preference, a preference for long-term technological autonomy over short-term fiscal efficiency. While the comparison to the F-35 is inevitable, it presents a false dichotomy between a finalized foreign product and an evolving domestic process. The success of this investment will not be determined by the cost of the first 20 units, but by the program's ability to stabilize costs through volume, and successfully integrate indigenous standoff weapons, and transition seamlessly to the multi-role Block 2 standard.